and welcome to Connect, Engage, Collaborate, a podcast brought to you by the Tempe Police Department. And I'm your host, Patricia Ramirez. Today, I'm joined by a panel of guests. And can you please start off by introducing yourself?
Yes, my name is John Orr. I'm retired. I retired from the Tempe Police Department. I started in July of 1972 and was elected as Tempe Justice of the Peace in November of 94. So I retired at the end of 1994, went to the Justice Courts, and then spent 17 years there and had the opportunity to see the next step in the justice process after the police are finished with cases. They ended up on my doorstep there. And I'm happy to be back because I've tried to stay in touch with the Tempe PD and keep up with what's going on, and it's pretty impressive.
Thank you for that, sir. And can you please introduce yourself?
My name is John Giltinan. I am currently a field operations lieutenant for the Tempe Police Department. I've been with the department since 2007, and I've been excited to do this all day long.
Thank you. And can you share with us a couple of your roles as you've been here and as you've progressed?
Absolutely. So I started in 2007 and was a field operations officer. In 2012, I went to become a field training officer. And then after that, I went out to be a recruit training officer at the Mesa Police Academy. And that was probably the best assignment of my patrol life. 2015, I came back to the department and I promoted to sergeant, where I went down to the Mill Avenue Bike Squad, went back to field operations for a couple of years, and then ended up in Criminal Investigation Special Victims Unit, where I had the chance to work with you.
Thank you. You did. And I enjoyed that time. And today we're going to talk about the change that we've seen in our department, in our community, and the city. So I'm going to ask you, Lieutenant, can you tell me, how does the department keep up with the growing population?
So the population itself, it's really interesting because Tempe's landlocked, right? We're the only city in the valley that is surrounded on every single side by another major metropolitan entity. So we grow up in this. And anyone that comes through Tempe, rides through Tempe, will see it. And our waterfront has high rises. Our downtown looks completely different than it did even 10 years ago. So right now we are growing up, and we are growing up fast, which makes our population extremely dense on it. You know, we have about 40 square miles worth of territory, and our population per square mile is packed on it. So we have the challenges of being able to police a really dense population that has both the urban nightlife on the Mill Avenue district, as well as business and residential in it.
Thank you for that. And Judge Orr, as you were driving to the department, what changes were you seeing visually? And can you tell us about some changes, even if you weren't driving?
Well, I did drive, but for me to discuss all the changes, we don't have that kind of time.
That is true.
Just to give you an idea, when I started on the Tempe Police Department, Guadalupe and McClintock was way out in the country. Elliott Road had just been paved. Warner Road was not a paved road. McClintock going down to Chandler Boulevard, which at that time was Williams Field Road, was concrete, and it was like pieces of concrete that were all attached together. As John mentioned, the high-rise building, of course, for years and years, the city's policy was that they would build no buildings in the downtown area taller than City Hall, 3 stories. The first one to break that ice was Centerpoint, and then and I believe that the city planners were basically starting to develop the understanding that the real estate in Tempe, with its proximity to the airport and central location, actually, the real estate was so valuable that you just flat couldn't restrict to just 3 stories. So when they lifted that restriction, now you see what's happened. Of course, ASU, when Dr. Crow came to ASU, the roof went off of their building, for decades. Manzanita Hall was the tallest building in the East Valley. Not just Tempe, but the entire East Valley. And like I say, once the roof came off of the city and Dr. Crow came to ASU, the growth has just gone crazy. And I remember when the city was toying with the idea of annexing further south, and the question was, is Phoenix going to annex Ahwatukee or will Tempe? And then all of a sudden, Phoenix annexed Ahwatukee, And in no time at all, the city of Chandler annexed everything across the south side of Tempe, which created the landlocked situation. At the time, we thought that was going to be the end of the world because we couldn't grow anymore. Actually, it turned out to be a blessing because instead of running water and sewer lines out into the desert like some of the valley cities have to do, Chandler, Peoria, all of those cities, Tempe can focus on improving the quality. And of course, they have to improve service lines to handle the high density population that John mentioned.
Yes. So thank you for discussing the city, but let's now take it to the police department. So I'm going to ask both of you this question. If you can tell me, what are some of the major changes that you've seen when it comes to policing here in Tempe?
Oh, Judge, I'll let you handle that one first.
When I started, officers carried revolvers instead of automatic weapons. We had basically 18 rounds of ammunition. You had 6 in your revolver, and you had 2 speed loaders with 6 rounds each, pair of handcuffs, and a can of mace, and that was it. We did issue helmets, but did not require that they be worn day to day. Phoenix at that time had gone to wearing helmets as part of their patrol uniform because of a big bar fight they had where an officer got seriously hurt. But the badges that we had, our chief then used to call them post toasties badges because they look like little things you'd get out of a cereal box. And not very long after I came out of the academy, then we got the badges that have now been phased out in favor of the new badges that officers carry. So there have been changes from apparel. In 73, we hired the first 3 female officers, and their uniforms consisted of a skirt and a blouse and a little 5-shot 2-inch revolver. And they had just a nice little holster, but that was all they carried. And that, of course, has changed over the years as well. So the equipment, the vehicles, the practices and techniques, everything about it has changed.
So I wanted to ask you a little more specific on that. So when you started and you're back in the academy, can you tell me about the women that were in the academy with you? I'm taking there were no women in there. And did you have limitation in terms of people of color in the academy? So can you tell me about the change in terms of who was actually serving the community?
Well, when I went through the academy, there were no Tempe women in the academy, but there were 2 from Phoenix. There was also a program in Phoenix called Recruiting and Orientation of Minority Police Officers, which was actively recruiting members from the minority community. Tempe really never got involved in that because it was never an issue here. We began hiring female officers very early on, and we didn't care about gender. We didn't care about race. We were looking for good people, and amazing, we found them. In fact, one of the things that I talked to John about was when I tested, there was a group, I would say, of 500 applicants, and that group of 500 would go around to every agency in the valley and take the test. And then it started with a written exam, and then from there you went to a physical and then an oral board and so on. And then today Tempe is testing, tomorrow Phoenix would be testing, then Mesa would be testing, then Scottsdale, Chandler, all of them. And it's the same pool of applicants. And so the plan from Tempe was get the selection process finished because we're going to hire 6 or 8 or 10 out of that group of 500. Phoenix is going to hire 40 or 50. So we would like our 6 or 8 or 10 to come from the top of the list and not 40 or 50 down below. So it was always a race to get the best quality candidates. And we gave basically no regard to gender, race. We didn't care. We were looking for good people.
Thank you for that history. And Lieutenant Giltinan, I'm going to pass it to you.
All right. So if you look at me right now, I am a walking technological monstrosity at this point. I think one of the biggest differences that we've had in recent times has been the addition of the body-worn camera. And it is a phenomenal tool because for really the first time, the public's able to see what police officers see and hear what they hear and get some sort of an idea of what police officers deal with on a day-to-day basis. It's been instrumental in providing a sense of transparency to the public that we serve. So I really like this as an addition tool to that. Judge Orr was saying about having the 5 police vehicles. We have significantly expanded our fleet at this point, and we have some pretty nice rides out there. But beyond that, we also have drones that are at our disposal to be able to help police in ways that weren't even thought of about 5-6 years ago when we started looking into the program. So technology has grown by leaps and bounds, and we really need that because, like I said before, we're dealing with a very dense population, and we have about 130 patrol officers right now to deal with that population. So we need the technological advantages that come with it. With the body-worn cameras, we also have cell phones that link up to it. So we have immediate access to the video and to other aspects of evidence and an immediate backup way to be able to get in touch with people when we want to on it.
Thank you for that. Can you highlight so who are we hiring? Who are we looking for? The changes in terms of whether that's for our sworn or professional staff. So if a listener was tuning in, would he or she be limited? Can you talk about the change that we've also seen and who we want?
Yeah, so I think Judge Orr said it the best on it. We want good people, and that's really who I want to surround myself with, because we, on the sworn side, we're entrusted with a number of responsibilities from the public that we serve. So to be able to hold that trust and to value that trust, we need good people to do it. I can teach someone how to shoot a gun. I can teach someone how to take a call for service, how to deal with the public. But really what we're looking for is that internal aspect of, are you a good person? And do you have a heart that is willing to go out and serve the Republic? That's not just, in the sworn side. That happens with our dispatchers who handled the very first contact that we have with citizens and residents of Tempe, right? They are the first person that our public calls when they need help. Our records employees and our detention officers, any aspect of the Tempe Police Department has to be filled with good people first. We can teach the job responsibilities.
Very true. Very true. And can you tell me, what has the evolution of patrolling looked like in Tempe?
So in the 15 years that I've been here, we have gone through a number of different philosophies. At first it was fight crime, and then it was being more community oriented. And right now we're working on collaborative leadership, community policing, and community engagement. That's the driving theory of what it means to be a Tempe police officer and serve the public. At the end of the day, policing itself doesn't change. We're entrusted to help the public protect themselves from people that would do them harm. We're entrusted to go into chaotic situations and make it better. It's been the same way since the 1960s when Judge Orr came on the service. Our main job is to be brought into chaos and make it better on the back end.
Very true. And my next question is, how have the advancements of technology changed and benefited from the early days?
Well, we talked about portable radios. That was a big deal. Cell phones, obviously another big deal. In fact, we had talked about getting a cell phone for the shift commander that looked like a car battery with a receiver hanging on top of it at one time. But the drone technology that John mentioned, years ago, the chief who started here back in the late 60s and came all the way through the late 80s was Art Fairbanks. And he was quite an innovator. And he recognized early on the need for a couple of different things. One of the first things he spotted the need for, because of the proximity of ASU and the football stadium and no freeways at that time, he saw that crowd control was a problem. And so he started a mounted unit and sent a couple of officers to the New York Police Department to train with them. And 2 of them, Jim Phillips and Lauren Wonderly, came back and they started our mounted unit. Interestingly enough, Chief Fairbanks really did not want police dogs because he recalls seeing all the newsreels from the race riots in the South where the police would sick the dogs on the protesters. So he didn't want to do that for the longest time. And then finally, in about 1979, I guess, we got 2 canine units up and operational as well. He did recognize the need for air surveillance and, believe it or not, had one of his staff members put together a concept to actually build a police blimp with the partnership of the Goodyear Corporation. And that got quite a ways down the road, but then for some reason, Goodyear stepped back from it, and the federal money it was going to pay for it, they redirected to other programs. So still with the desire to create some type of air support unit, we did put an ultralight aircraft in the air with 2 pilots. And oddly enough, it was really very effective. There were many times where we would have a ground unit in pursuit of somebody, or there would be a burglar who jumped a fence in a neighborhood and an officer on foot lost him. And the ultralight would go over and circle until he spotted the guy, and it was very effective. Then we graduated to a little bit larger aircraft, Kit Fox, which was, basically an enclosed ultralight, and that there was a minor crash involved with that, and then City Hall decided the liability involved is too great to have something other than a full-size aircraft, and a full-size aircraft is too expensive for the city to pay for. So with the advancement of drone technology that John mentioned, that gives the police department that aerial point of view without the tremendous exposure to liability that we had with manned aircraft up there. So there's a lot of changes. And, Tempe has always been open to innovation. You talked about patrol techniques. In 1992, Bill Clinton was elected president, and he started talking about community policing. And he even created grants for agencies just the size of ours to hire officers to facilitate community policing. Interestingly enough, 14 or 15 years before anybody ever really heard of Bill Clinton outside Arkansas, a guy here in Tempe named Terry Stewart researched and developed a program that, with the assistance of federal funding, it was called community-specific policing. And it was the forerunner to the geographic deployment model that Tempe employs to this day. I take a look at police agencies, and I also, today, I'll look at Sears and Amazon. Sears had everything in place to be Amazon. They had the catalog operation. They had all the delivery set. They had everything. They didn't have the vision. And now, when I take a look at Tempe and their involvement and their need to connect with the community, this community-specific policing doesn't really mean specific to Tempe. It means specific to this neighborhood or that neighborhood or this downtown area. And so with an appropriate deployment of personnel, Tempe is in a better position than I would say 98% of any other law enforcement agency in America in being able to provide services for specific issues in specific neighborhoods around the city. Other cities can't do that because it's their brand of community policing. They hire half a dozen community policing officers, and everybody else goes around their business as normal. Big difference.
Makes me proud to hear all that. Thank you for that. And we did earlier speak in another conversation about the drones we are using, but I specifically want to ask you if you can fill us in more and tell us. I know that there's a passion behind that for you, and can you talk to us about the drones we're using?
Absolutely. So I was brought into the drone program pretty early on to help get it up and running. We got the equipment in about January of 2020, and right after we got the equipment, the world shifted. Right, we shifted with COVID. We shifted with civil unrest related to the George Floyd incident. The entire society took a couple steps sideways. And the drones became really instrumental on how we dealt with it at that time. So we were able to put drones up, and we were able to monitor people being able to express their right to protest and petition the government, the stuff that is protected and enshrined in our Constitution. Our drones were able to help us watch that and make sure that they were peacefully doing it, that they were abiding by the laws, and that they were safe in what they were doing on it. So the drone program, I, for lack of a better pun, took off. Yes, I said it, Judge Orr. I'm sorry. It took off. It took off at that time, and it's been used in a variety of ways ever since. So we've used it for suspect apprehensions. We've used it on search warrants. I think one of the best ones, we served a search warrant at a high rise. And as our team was making contact at the door, the bad guy threw out a bunch of illicit narcotics out the window and down probably 20 stories worth of air on it. And our drone was right outside the window and caught him doing that and was able to keep an eye on the package until it could be collected on it. So I think the upward trend for drones is really unlimited at this point. We've moved into taking construction scenes and crime scenes and reconstructing them at a small subsection of time and getting full 3D models of it. So I think that's the next big step in where drones are going to be useful. And it's pretty impressive to sit back, watch, and see what our equipment can do.
And if you don't mind, if you can help on this, I did ask this question, but I think you might have even some more information. So if someone is listening and worried about privacy and is this big brother, how do we help balance that out and take care of that issue?
So it was an issue that was brought forth at the very inception of the program. And we actually went to the ACLU and said, what are the best practices, and take a look at what we plan to do on this and how can we best protect the people in their right to privacy as possible. So we set up a bunch of systems in place that make sure that this is not Big Brother. For example, when we take the drone off, we have the camera positioned up so it is not recording anything until it gets over top of where we want it to be on it and where we are actively using the drone. And when then we are done and the drone returns back to base, we put the camera back up. So we are really trying to limit what that drone is used for law enforcement purposes in it. And I think that if people are worried about, 1984 and Big Brother and all the stuff that, could be a valid concern, we have put steps, processes, and procedures in place to really protect that because we do value our residents' right to privacy.
Excellent. Thank you for all of that information.
Patricia, let me
Yes.
piggyback that comment as well, because that fits hand in glove into the concept of the geographic deployment model that the Tempe police use. You always have a citizen who's going to be afraid of Big Brother. We had an ultralight circling a neighborhood with a burglar crouched behind a dumpster, and he was trying to direct ground units in to arrest this burglar, and a resident about 3 doors down was screaming about invasion of privacy, and all we were trying to do was get a look at his wife who was out sunbathing. We didn't have time for that. But what we found is that by geographically deploying officers and getting officers and sergeants to know the communities they serve, and more importantly, have the community get to know them, it became an issue of one person in the neighborhood and the rest of his neighbors saying, "You're crazy. They don't have time for that." And so he became an isolated voice rather than some type of movement. And that building of trust and the relationship between the police department and the community as a prerequisite for anything you want to do is so crucial, and in Tempe, so effective that it makes this city different than any place else in the country.
Thank you for that added information. And can we now talk about leadership and how has our leadership evolved and changed?
Well, we've gone from cavemen to
That is true.
what we have today with all the camera.
Yes.
Actually, I've done a lot of reading about the evolution of law enforcement in the country, and the Valley of the Sun is almost a microcosm of that. Right after the Second World War, police departments were basically somewhat corrupt. In some of the cities back east, the cops were nothing more than the enforcement arm of the local politicians. Arizona never really got too deeply into that, but back in the time after the war, you had a lot of people coming back from World War II who had a military bearing. They understood military discipline. They understood rules and regulations, and they needed work. And so they became police officers. There was a chief in Phoenix way back when named Charlie Thomas, and he was very big on control. checking to make sure that the officers were all working within the boxes that he established for them. At one point, Chief Fairbanks decided that everyone in the department, lieutenant and above, would be required to go to a long course school, either the FBI National Academy or the Northwestern Traffic Institute or the Southern Police Institute. Those were the three available. And so everyone took advantage of that. He also implemented what I affectionately call the Fairbanks philosophy of transfer, so that everybody in the department, not just the officers, but even the leadership, every couple of years you get up and move to another assignment and someone else would take yours, because his philosophy was the best police officer is someone who has a broad base of police experience. Then we started moving away from the heavy duty control. And again, with the geographic deployment model, we started getting to where we would assign sergeants in beats to be, in essence, a neighborhood police chief. Those sergeants were given the latitude to do what they had to do to solve a problem in their area. And, the culture of this organization led to Tempe providing police chiefs in Yuma, Lake Havasu City, Federal Way, Washington, Redmond, Washington, Lakewood, Colorado, Champaign, Illinois, Coolidge. For years, the director of the Arizona Department of Corrections was a former major with the Tempe Police Department. When I retired, I became the Justice of the Peace and later became the presiding Justice of the Peace for Maricopa County. So everything was built toward development of leaders and personnel. The bad news is that for a tremendous period of time back there, they were always trying to hire somebody who aspired to be a chief of police. Well, the problem is in any department, there's usually only one of those. And so you had all these people who really wanted to be a police chief, and they couldn't because the chief here was going to be here for a while. So they left to become chiefs elsewhere. And then I would say it was probably about 1979 or 1980 where finally we recognized that, it's not all bad to hire somebody who wants to work a beat for his career. And so we started getting away from trying to hire people other than those who wanted to be police chiefs. And I think it's paid great dividends.
And Lieutenant Giltinan, tell me, what change have you seen in terms of leadership?
So I've been through a couple different police chiefs now, and I would say that Chief Glover is uniquely positioned. His vision matches what we need to serve our residents in the here and now on it. And it also sets a foundation for where we can go in the future. The terms collaborative leadership, community policing, community engagement, those aren't lip service terms. Those are what we're actively working toward and working for with the department. And it's happening at every level of our department. Like Judge Orr was saying with the geographical deployment, we still have sergeants that are assigned to beats. And each quarter, those sergeants lead a beat meeting with officers to come up with the best way to fight crime and to deal with the issues that are surrounding in that beat on it. And that's the type of collaboration, if I can say that word easily. That's the type of collaboration that we're looking for on the small level, and it carries through to the lieutenant work group and through the commanders and up through the executive team on it. But really, I think the most important part is how do we now engage with the community? Because we're still feeling the after effects of 2020. We're still feeling the after effects of that shift that we had. And we have a way to go as we start to rebuild the trust for the people that we serve. So being able to go out and engage with the community and show them that, while I do wear a uniform, while, I badge gun all the whole 9 yards on it, the issues that I have in my neighborhoods are the same issues that you have. There's a humanity behind what the police officer that you see brings to the table on it. I think that, as far as leadership styles go, I know Chief Glover and Chief Masters and Chief Anderson and Chief Montenegro are extremely interested and passionate about developing their officers and their leaders to be able to take the next step and be able to provide the best service for the community. Because Judge Orr said it the best. He said, we're not hiring police chiefs on it. We're hiring officers. And we are looking for good people who show leadership characteristics, and we will invest in them at that point. And that's really, I think, the foundation for building a strong and good police department.
And I like what you just said. We are definitely willing to invest in people. And I have seen you in your career, and I was just speaking about that before we sat down here formally. And you're an example of that leadership of how we invest. And I would like a listener who is interested in a sworn position, professional staff. We are willing to give to one another and build a person.
Yeah, that was actually a lesson I learned back when I was a teenager. I was involved in the martial arts when I was a teenager, and as I went up through the ranks and became a teacher on it, I started to look at my instructor, and he never looked at what was in it for himself. He always looked at about what was in it for his students. And really, the best way that I can honor that legacy is
Mhm.
to be able to look at my officers and my sergeants and be like, how can I best serve them? How can I best develop them so they are exactly what the public needs at this point?
Touches my heart. Thank you for that. And so let's talk about the community. So, with all this great change that we've seen, how does this come back to benefiting our community?
Well, I think the community is best served by a police department that is close to the community and the community knows them. And I don't mean just, okay, there's a Tempe police officer, but there's Dave. He works the day shift in my area. The closer you get to that, to where Dave knows his community, and you may look at a status board or statistics all you want to and decide, well, there's a real problem with burglary in this particular part of town, so you send your resources in to address that, without knowing that perhaps in that part of town, okay, they have a burglary problem, but what's really aggravating the people in that neighborhood is the traffic. So the better the community knows the police department and the police department knows the community, the better it can serve it. And a cookie cutter, one size fits all version of community policing, um, I think gives a politician the opportunity to say, gee, look what we're doing. But when you want to have an effective law enforcement collaboration with the community, then it has to be different. Tempe is we talked about it's landlocked. Its population density is the highest in the state, but also its geographic area is one of the smallest in the state. And yet, policing in Tempe down at Warner and McClintock is entirely different than trying to police Mill Avenue on Saturday night and deal with the merchants down there who are paying the bills. So tailoring the police services to each individual neighborhood in Tempe or any community is the way to go. And Tempe is well on its way to doing that. I'd like to piggyback something else that John said about the career opportunities. It's true now that law enforcement professionals have wised up and they're not all trying to hire the next police chief in the selection process. But I don't think I ever had a job for more than 2 years until I came to the Tempe Police Department. And even then, I don't think I had a job for more than 2 years until I became the patrol commander. I worked patrol. I was a burglary detective. I was a solo motor officer. I was a counselor at the academy, which was the forerunner to the RTO. An academy sergeant, went back to patrol, and then as a division commander, ran all the divisions in the police department. So for people who are looking for a career, if you look at law enforcement as not just, well, I'm going to be a cop, and that cop means all of this. Really, would you like to be a school liaison officer or a mounted officer or a canine officer or a bomb technician or a burglary detective, or would you like to get into leadership? There are so many avenues within the same employer that I don't think new hires even think about that. Obviously, they've got to think about getting through the police academy and then surviving their field training and probation. But then after that, career opportunities are all over the place. And a police department the size of Tempe is the perfect size for that, because it's not just this great big mass of humanity like the NYPD with 35 or 40,000 officers. And yet Tempe still has all of those opportunities. It's really a great police department
It's incredible.
to look at. Yeah, it is.
Yeah. Thank you. And so I would like to hear from you. What do you think in terms of the community and all this change and how it truly does come back to benefit our community?
I think that as police, we have the responsibility to set foot in the community and to join them in their efforts. Because if you look at any community across the United States, the number one thing they want is I want to feel safe
Mhm.
in what I do. Then I want to be able to move freely back and forth, to and fro, hither and yon, wherever I got to go to be able to move without traffic or congestion or any of the stuff that would aggravate a human being as they're trying to move, right? So they want to be safe. They want to be able to move on that part, and we have to really set forward and set foot into the community and be like, yes, we are here to help you feel safe. We want to partner with you in that because I can't fix a situation until after the situation occurs on it, right? Police are often very reactive on it. We can do proactive strategies where we can be in places where crime has historically been occurring and try and be there for a quicker response or try to prevent the crime from happening. But really, a bulk of a cop's job is reactive. We get called to a place to make it better on it. So we really have to be able to partner with the community and be like, these are the steps that you can take to make it better before we come. These are how we are going to make it better right now. And then we can't leave it there. We have to be able to say, in the future, here is how we can work with you to continue to make it well. And I think that's kind of the community engagement part where we need to work on it a little bit. We need to be able to say, yes, you called us. We have made it better. How can we help you in the future so that this does not happen on it? I think that's the responsibility of the police department.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You ever notice how the fire code is part of the city code? They design buildings to reduce the likelihood of fire. They require sprinklers in all kinds of. I see sprinklers in here.
Yes.
Years ago, we became familiar with the concept of CPTED, crime prevention through environmental design, and a guy named Dick Steely, who was one of our crime prevention officers, worked very closely with the city and tried very hard to get them to incorporate CPTED principles right into the building code. And at that time, the city was not ready for that, but the city is still here, and the police department is still here, and CPTED is still here. So never say die, I say. And when you talk about being proactive, hardening your target is certainly a great way to start.
You just gave me a memory. He was one of my first sergeants.
Dick Steely?
Mm-hmm.
I'm sorry. It could happen
Yes.
to anyone.
Yes. Well, I just want to take this time and I want to thank both of you for sitting down, for giving us great history, and also for talking about the change. I'm very proud to be an officer here, and I know that we do the best for the community here. So I thank both of you.
You're very welcome.